Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm joined today by Steve Pokorny from Freedom Coaching. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thanks so much, Colleen. An honor to be here with you.
It's an honor to have you here on the show. And Freedom Coaching is basically a ministry that helps people break free from the grip of pornography. Is that like a good summary of what your mission does?
Yeah. So even more, what we say succinctly is it's a one-to-one mentoring system for both men and women to transform desires through that transformation of mind, heart, and vision, so we can break that attraction permanently.
Perfect. That's a great summary. Could you give our audience a little background of like what led you to this mission, to this
Yeah.
ministry?
Yeah. So, sometimes it's the mother of invention is the mother of all necessity, shall we say? In many cases, for myself, it was a world of pain. My father was out of the picture by the time I was 5 from a failed suicide attempt. He was in a nursing home. So, growing up without a father. And so I feel deeply for those in our world right now, Colleen, who are trapped in that place of my father was absent, wasn't the best father there, and that deeply impacted me. Both my parents would pass away to cancer when I was in high school, and smack dab in the middle of that, pornography was invited into my world. Right? I didn't know what I was experiencing. I didn't know what I was being shown. But very quickly into my high school years, I would say I started developing this compulsion. The sad reality of it, nobody was talking about it. Had no insights to go here. I didn't receive a healthy formation, human or sexual formation, and so I didn't know how to handle this, right? And I also remember very clearly this also be projected onto women in a sense, a lot of anger in many cases, because you're the source of the problem. That's the way that came out there. Whereas no, this is my own problem and things in here, but stemming from childhood wounds that nobody was talking to me about and getting healed there. So in high school, going to college, even going to seminary, this was very much a part of my life. I was in seminary 3 years minor, 1 year major seminary. This was very much going on here. I would leave there and taught one very painful year of high school theology, and I ended up at Franciscan University, where God had some other plans for me. Whereas, especially with those of the work that you do at HLI, the ministry, especially with pregnant women, and I had been caught in the idea that like a woman who had an abortion, who 30 years ago and is going to confession week after week after week, hearing she's forgiven, but couldn't forgive herself. That was my world. I thought I will have this forever, this guilt, this shame. I'm gonna be trapped here forever, and it was coloring my world. Well, Franciscan University comes along the line here, and I heard at a festival of praise, which picture about 1,500 to 2,000 people praising God, heard a very important passage from Isaiah 43:19. Behold, I'm doing something new. Do you not perceive it? Colleen, I had been drinking from the proverbial septic tank, we like to call it here at Freedom Coaching, and God is offering me fresh water. I don't know exactly what to do with this, but it's getting a little weird, and he's speaking to a lot of the deep, intimate parts of my heart, and I'm being wooed, in a huge way here. And after actually going to 2 weeks later, receiving the Eucharist, the body, blood, soul, divinity of God incarnate, it happens. The Father breaks through, and I hear for the first time in my life, "You, Stephen, are my well-beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." He's pleased with me after all I've done, after all the using I've done, especially of my sisters. Yeah, he wanted to love me completely. And he wasn't satisfied with leaving me where I was at, but he wanted to get my attention, especially here. For whatever reason, it was that time of life. And for a period of about 4 months, I had no issues whatsoever, unfiltered, no accountability software. But then, like Peter, I took my eyes off Jesus and I sank back into the septic tank. And what God wanted to do, he wanted to get me to get to the root of the issue. So over a period of time, several years, discovered three very important elements. One was called theophostic prayer, where the smoke, the emotions are the smoke that lead to the fire of getting these deeper issues. Second led to something called intensive trauma therapy, which sounds scary. It's not. It's drawing and writing. And it was the first time in my life, in that week, actually dealing with my issues of pornography. Actually, let's go deep into this. And profound healing happened there. And then the third element, along with many of my studies of marriage and family, but also in theology of the body, coming to discover and learning how to see the human body appropriately uncovered, the way in which the church views the human body, the naked human body, is worlds apart from pornography. And when I am getting trained by that vision, scales fell from my eyes, no longer desiring to look with lust. A very different reaction here. And so to answer fuller on the question that you gave there, as invention being the mother of necessity, I started doing marriage preparation in the Archdiocese of San Antonio, where I live. And I'd give my testimony, and some guys would come up to me like, I got this issue. What do I do? I'm like, well, I guess I can help you. Well, I discovered very quickly what I went through was not just meant for me, but it was meant for the world. And so in 2011, Freedom Coaching is born. And I was a lone wolf till about 2018 when our second coach would come on board. And now we have 13 coaches who are doing this work worldwide. And it's an honor and a privilege.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
What makes freedom coaching unique? Because we
Mm.
had Jeannie and Bruce Hahnemann on the podcast about 2 years ago at this point, and they were talking about how their ministry deals with like basically rewiring the brain, like the
Mm.
addiction side of pornography. Is there anything unique specific about freedom coaching?
Yeah, great question. Let's dig in on this. So, first and foremost, let's define some terms because I think the terminology, in order to actually address issues, we need to
Mhm.
have correct terminology. First is the word pornography. So, obviously, from the Greek, it's the writing of prostitutes. But the way in which we fully will develop that term is any written, audio, or visual that's trying to get us to use another person as a means of one's own selfish sexual gratification. And then you have the term addiction. Okay. When a lot of people hear the term addiction, they hear once hooked, always hooked. And we like to say that it's not the most appropriate terminology to use here because if we're hearing once hooked, always hooked, why bother? This is going to be my life. This is going to be my identity. And what we would say is the better term is compulsion. Compulsion is an attachment. It's serious. It needs to be dealt with, but it can be healed. And that's very encouraging, especially for those like myself over a decade. I don't know what to do about this. And then realizing there's a whole nother way to live my life that actually brings joy and I'm comfortable in my own skin, right? So, and this is not to attack or threaten any other organization that's doing work in this arena. I want to make that very clear because this issue is legion. It is everywhere. It's affecting all walks of life. I don't have to convince you about this, Colleen, especially with the work that you do in HLI. But we find that in a lot of organizations, the quote unquote solutions boil down to four reasons. Four ways to approach the answer. Number one is what I call the Matt Walsh approach. Just stop looking at it. Okay. I like Matt on a lot of things, and he's helped us figure out what is a woman, but he's kind of off base on this whole thing. And the idea of just stop looking at it boils down to mere willpower.
Mhm.
That other organization you mentioned, they're absolutely right. You're dealing with a bunch of chemicals in the brain, and there is a rewiring that is absolutely necessary in this factor, right? The neural pathways and things like this, and mirror neurons to work through that. Second is going to be accountability software, do it using various forms of technology for accountability. And those things, again, everything on this list of four, it's not a bad thing, Colleen,
Mhm.
because if they're actually helping to solve the problem, great. The problem is we work with very intelligent people, okay, in the work that we do in freedom coaching. And okay, we'll put this web filtering or accountability software on this device. Well, I'll just buy another device, or I'll go to the library or go to the Mac store and I'll just view it there, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. Third is pray it away. Okay. This is the number, I'm Catholic. This is the number one sin confessed in the confessional by far. It's been said number two is stealing, which I think with pornography, we're trying to steal beauty. Beauty is something is to be given, not taken. And here, just in confessionals, right? For instance, at a penance, pray in Our Father and three Hail Marys. Well, I'm all about prayer, But again, we're dealing with a neural problem in many cases and a heart problem. There needs to be a transformation there. So grace and prayer is important, but we got to do something more than just, it's not a pray it away issue here. It's a lot more involved. And the fourth way is going to be accountability, or having a spiritual director, moving from a place from isolation to communio, to communion with others. Very important, Colleen. But if the person doesn't know how to actually solve the problem, then it's just advice. And I'm a type A guy. I want to solve the problem. So those quote unquote solutions fail to be that. And that's what we find with the clients who come to us. I've tried everything. I don't know what to do. We're like, you're the perfect kind of client. We want to talk with you.
So what exactly, so you work one-on-one with them, helping them get to the root of whatever is causing them to be like having that compulsion towards pornography?
Yeah, so we use a four-stage process in what we're doing. Okay, so we're looking here to break the attraction permanently and transform them. So how do we do that? So stage one is called a reintegration. We're looking at a client's history through an emotional lens. What causes us, like if anybody, let's take it out of the realm of pornography for a second. Somebody who has an attachment to chocolate. Okay, I like chocolate, right? Chocolate's not a bad thing to eat, right? Just as human sexuality is not a bad thing. But if we're constantly pounding chocolate, we got to take a step back and say, okay, what's actually going on here? What's actually the attachment here, right? And we want to make it clear. We do have psychologists, we do have counselors on staff with us, but we're staying on the realm of coaching, and the difference between this, counseling is more an archaeologist is digging into the past for the reasons there, and a coach is more an architect. We've got a house to build. I don't know what to do. I'm calling an expert to help me to build that here. But in order to build in the work we're doing, we've got to solidify the base here. So getting access to the emotions of what is driving here and just identifying what are the emotions. This is a beautiful thing. So if it's been guilt, shame, and self-hatred, Colleen, that has been the force field that's locking people in, when we can just get access to the emotions, this drops that force field. Then we can introduce them to the chief psychologist. His name is Jesus. You might have heard of him. He then goes to work on them, and there's beautiful, beautiful messages from God that our clients receive. Things, I have a holy jealousy that they're receiving this, right? We all want those messages from God. But if we've had earplugs in our heart, shall we say, using that idea, right? Especially if it's guilt, shame, and self-hatred, where there's a lot of that stigma with sexuality attached. When we can finally get those removed, which is just by sharing the emotions at the time of these traumas that come in, then we can start hearing what we've been looking for. That's just stage one, and beautiful things happen. Stage two is a deep dive into the neuroscience of pornography. So it's helping us understand why we can't break free on our own willpower. Clients just having that understanding realize like, oh, I've got to do much more. It's got to be something more than just mere coping mechanisms. I've got to go deeper. So, Colleen, if stages 1 and 2 is a breaking down, stages 3 and 4 is a building up. So stage 3 is identity formation. You were a teenager. I was a teenager. We make some silly and sometimes stupid choices, right? When we don't know who we are. So we want to drive into what is their true identity? It's the beloved son or daughter of God, right? And the way to get to that space is genuine intimacy with God, with oneself, with others in a very healthy way. And then stage 4, I would like to say it's pretty unique to freedom coaching, is vision coaching. The reason why an incredible number of men and increasing number of women are dealing with this, Colleen, is because they're blind. They've never learned how to see the body correctly. If we cannot see, we're blind. If we're blind, we cannot love. If we cannot love, we cannot fulfill the very meaning of our purpose in being on this planet. So what's the answer? We do a deep dive into beauty, into art, and learning how to see the body as God has created us to see it, right? So what happens is inevitably, especially in stage 4, these scales fall from their eyes, just like it happened with me. And instead of this movement towards this ravenous lust, it's a very different reaction. And Colleen, this is the work that we're doing, we like to say, is if we're simply saying, helping people to quit porn, we're not doing enough. What we want is that transformation so that when they see that homeless person they pass like 50 times a month, or that when you go to the coffee shop to pay for an overpriced latte, right? right? We all know what I'm talking about in this economy.
Mhm.
Um, do we see the person? Can I love this person? So what we're talking about is redeemed vision. And then just think about it, the different wars that are going on with Ukraine or Gaza, right? The reason why these two, at least two groups of people are involved in this is they're not seeing each other. So this redeemed vision, taken to its nth degree, is not about simply ending unchaste behavior, but it's how do we enter into love? How do we enter and see the other? The other person is not my enemy. This is my brother and sister in Christ, which is ultimately a fulfillment of Matthew 25. Lord, when did we see you naked? When did we see you hungry? When did we see you tired and or imprisoned? When you did this to the least of mine, you did this to me. And it's only by learning how to see with his redeemed vision that that's possible.
Well, and it sounds like that's kind of the vision of like culture of life in general. Like that's
Yeah.
obviously the name of the podcast is living a culture of life. And that's why I like
Yes.
to have these different conversations on because it's really helping people to live life to the fullest by being able to see like everyone else as a child of God and have that vision that you're talking about.
Amen, amen. Yeah, and I think this is that's why I love HLI. I've been supporting you guys for years. I've talked to you guys up and down to lots of people. So yes, affirming your podcast. Please keep doing the work you're doing. Critically needed.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, the work that you're doing sounds like it's just contributing. It's all, I love how in the Catholic pro life world, it's just like all
Mm,
these different streams coming into one river. Like everyone might have a unique area of focus, but it's all kind of part of this great culture of life, this vision of the human person and
yeah.
contributing to like the church's vision of life. So,
Absolutely, and if I can comment on that, is Colleen, like I remember listening to Curtis Martin of Focus years ago at a conference, and he was saying, "Listen, what's your goal? What are your gifts? What are your talents? What are your charisms? Right? The world's on fire. We've got all these problems here, right? So pick something. Pick something. Go to God. Get an inkling of maybe I've got a desire to serve in this way, and go do that. Get really good at that. So like this is our niche. This is what we do. We're really good at this, right? The issue of saving children from abortion, really important work. That's not our primary work, but does our work contribute to that solving some of that problem? You betcha.
yeah. Yeah, we actually did. We had someone on at one time talking about the connection between pornography and abortion and
Mm,
how they're both like objectifying a person and
yes.
seeing the other person as something to be used or a problem to get rid of, be gotten rid of. And so it's just like really interesting to think about the connection there too of like
Mhm.
if you see sex as something that you are entitled to and can go after or you can have at the click of a button on the internet, like it's all this using of other people in a sexual way. And then if you start doing that physically with people, then you're going to end up with a lot of the same problems of sexes and end in itself.
Yeah, no,
Um,
let's on that point, right? Very important, right? I mean, what are we doing here? We with pornography, it is dehumanizing. It is creating this environment of programming, of training to view and treat other persons as objects. Which, if we're coming from Karol Wojtyła, John Paul II, right? This is a violation of the personalistic norm, right? Where every human being is meant to be treated as a gift in and unto themselves, right? And if we've been doing this in our private viewing time, right? It may be done in private, but guess what? We're going to go out in public. This is as the old nursery rhyme goes, right? Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. What we see, what we watch forms us, right? Even if it's in private, we're going to take that in public, right? And what we find is, especially because of, for instance, dopamine, the dopamine receptors, they shrink. It's not enough. And so what I'm doing there, it's not enough. I want to get involved in real life with persons. Well, if I'm viewing this person, right, and I'm entering into unchaste behavior with another person, then what ends up happening is, the act goes right, the sexual act goes right, right. Well, a child comes forth from that. Well, I've been only pursuing pleasure at the expense of the person, and now persons. We have to get rid of that whole thing, and this is what is behind with the abortion industry. That's why the root pornography use is the root of so many issues. The issue of trafficking going on here, which is a $150 billion a year industry, and if it doesn't change, it's going to go to $215 billion a year. So these are huge things to work on. So if we haven't been paying attention to this issue of pornography, I encourage you who are hearing this, go deeper into this, because you're going to find that the roots of so many problems are going to find their source right here in this issue.
yeah, no, it's such a big issue, and it's one that in my opinion, should be talked about more. But that's going to go into my next question, which is that
Yeah.
in Catholic and Christian circles, there tends to be a stigma about talking about pornography and
Mm,
sexual sins. And either the object, like the topic of conversation of sex, is something that parents are uncomfortable talking about with their
mm.
children, or there's a stigma against people don't want to share that they're struggling with porn because they don't want to be judged or shamed. Is this a conversation that should be talked about more? And is there a downside to having it be something that's a topic like that people talk about more freely?
Sure. This is a big topic that this question is, or a couple of questions, is really important. So what we can say is this is a 572,000 pound elephant in the room, right? We just talked about, right? From the Catholic world, it's the number one sin confessed in the confessionals. We talked about. I have heard 8 homilies in my life, 5 online, 3 in person. One has actually been at my parish, right? And if we're not hearing it there, where are we hearing it? Because again, I think we've, especially if we want to go as late as the 1960s, it's probably before then, especially with the quote unquote sexual de-evolution, right? You have a breakdown in Christian sexual mores that have come in here, and we've made mistakes. All of us have made mistakes, right? We're all hypocrites, right? I can speak for myself on this, and we may think that because I've made a mistake, I have no right to say anything. Well, let's get over the fact. I'm broken, you're broken, we're broken, let's be broken together. Let's talk about these things, right? Um, the truth is the truth is the truth, right? At the end of the day, it is only the truth that liberates. It's only the truth that sets us free. So this is an issue. If it's not going away, we do need to talk about it. If we're coming from the Catholic perspective, right? Our Lady of Fatima, 1917, said, I see hell. Mary said, I see souls descending into hell like snowflakes, and it is many of those is because of sins of the flesh, right? So we want to make this very clear. It's the most common of breaking of relationship with God, which is what sin is. But it's not the most it's not the most serious of sin. Pride is the most serious one here, right? So we need to, and how we actually can solve problems is we bring them into the open. If we've looked in the past, 15, 20 years, at more than that, with if we just want to highlight the priest abuse issues, which is not every priest by any means, but the reason why this was allowed to take place was because of silence and secrecy, which is unacceptable. This issue is occurring because of silence and secrecy. It's known as sexual silence. We need to bring this out, talk this out, appropriately so, right? And so where a downside, Colleen, would be is if we come and we hammer a person. Oh, you've been doing that on your phone. You're evil and dirty. You're unforgivable. That's not the message of Jesus. And that's not the message of the Catholic Church. And that's not the message of who we are to be as human beings. It is care and compassion. It is delicacy that is to be here. I think we need to get educated on the issue. We need to talk about how do we have those conversations. We may be a little unsure how to do that, but if we're aware somebody in our life, if we're a parent, we know a child, one of our children is being involved in this, or we know one of our friends is involved in this, or maybe it's a spouse who this is an issue that's contributing here. Because we know with the work we're doing, both men and women come to us. This is going on in our marriage. I don't know what to do about this. We do need to air this out. So I think the care and compassion, if we don't do that, that's where the downside is. But the upside is, what's the upside, Colleen? We can actually help these people get free. We can get them to live a life of extraordinary joy, of peace, of being comfortable in their own skin. And that's the message here, especially as we're speaking. If you hear this, today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Come to the one, come to the bridegroom who wants to give you the love that you're looking for.
Amen. Yeah, I think it's one that's important for people to be aware of. Just like I like what you were saying of the like holistic view of redeeming the vision too, because that's when you're getting past the like you're a bad, terrible person because you're not using enough willpower to get over this. Like if you recognize the fact that there's a neurological side to it and a spiritual side, and there's so
Yes.
many different aspects that need to be healed, you can have a more complete conversation and one that's can like bring together both the yes, this is wrong and it like we shouldn't be doing it, but also here's where the healing is in all these different ways.
Absolutely. No, yeah. So I think the approach that's best of that taking this is we need to ask this question. I think this is one of the strengths, especially of HLI, and one of the strengths of just Christian. If we want to use the term morality, I think that's a weighted term in many cases. But it all starts with like if we look at the Catechism, it doesn't start with you're bad and evil, and if you don't stop, you're going to hell. It starts with one of the sections. I think is section 4 on Christian morality. Christian, know your dignity, know thy dignity. What is your dignity? Who is the human person? What is our deepest desires of our hearts, right? As we like to say, the issue with pornography and unchaste behavior is not so much the pornography and unchaste behavior. That's a problem. I'm not going to say it's not, but it's what's underneath that, right? So for me, it was a bunch of trauma that was going on here. And anytime that sexuality is not presented in a holistic, wholesome way that's connected with the whole of love and life, that's connected with marriage and family, if that's the message we've received, or God forbid, this has been exposed to us or imposed upon us, that's a trauma. These things, the emotions buried alive, are still alive. And if we don't deal with this stuff, it's going to come up. Just this morning, actually dealing with a client, not sharing any details, but he never realized till he's actually working with another coach on other business things, realizing that, oh my gosh, like all these things like of my past really affected me. And and the reason why I keep looping, going back and back again and again in these things is I've never, so we say, finish the conversation. We need to, most of us talk to ourselves. Colin, you probably do. I definitely do, right? But very few of us actually solve the problem, actually finish the conversation. And that's what trauma is going on in the back of our life. That these things are meant to be healed. And I think this is another reason why God allows that pain to come up. Right, as C.S. Lewis would say, right, God whispers through our pleasures, but he shouts through our pain. Pain is a megaphone God uses to rouse a sleeping world. So what are the pain? And guess this is for all of us, right? What are the pains? What are the hurts? What are the aches in our life? What are the maybe compulsions we have? Maybe it's not pornography. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's ego. Right? What are those things? What's driving at that? And we're not. And the invitation is big word, curious. Get curious about this. Start asking those questions. That's what we at Freedom Coaching are really good at doing. We're really well trained at this to help people to start asking those big questions about what was going on there, but not just ask the questions. Then let's go find some satisfying answers here.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that struck me when I was listening to your story before this episode to prepare for it was that you had said that your father not being around when you were a child left like this hole in your life. What is the role of fathers in
Mm.
like protecting their children from porn, either from exposure in the first place or from having that empty wound, that hole that they're trying to fill later on?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. We can do an entire seminar on this, so we'll try to keep it succinct. So I'd say at the root is my friend Mark Houck likes to say from the Kingsmen that the three roles of men and masculinity is as a leader, a protector, and a provider. We're designed to lead. We're called to go out. We're called to bring people with us, not on our own. We're called to be a protector, be aware of what's going on, and provide right in here. So I would say on those lines, let's draw from those elements. Number one is as a father, you got to be honest about yourself, right? What are your weaknesses? What are your blind spots, right? If we use a military terminology, what's at your six, right? If we're using the clock, what's behind you, right? What are the things here that were my Achilles heel? So if pornography is in my life or unchaste behavior, or I haven't dealt with this stuff here, it's got to be dealt with. If pornography is going on in your life right now, we've got to ditch the porn. If you don't know how to do it, well, there's this thing called Freedom Coaching. We'd be happy to help you out here, right? So you got to look at your access points also for children. What are the access points? This is different, Colleen, than you and I growing up, right? I grew up in the 80s primarily, and 80s and 90s, and we didn't have that much choice of technology. Now we got these in our pocket, right? These little devices that are stronger and more powerful than any of the earlier computers growing up, right? And we have a touch of a button, we can get access to stuff that it was never dreamed of seeing. The amount of naked women that men especially can see was never dreamed of in history. Now at the touch of a button, doing whatever. And so we have to be very well aware, and we have to remember the culture is not playing fair. This is at root is a war, God versus the devil. The devil's not as strong as God. So we can say Saint Michael versus Satan in many cases. And this is a war here, a war for our minds, our hearts, our bodies, but especially as Sister Lucia had said from Fatima, the ultimate war, the final war in our times is over marriage and the family. And so our culture doesn't play fair here. So we've got to be hawks about our what are the kind of things we're watching. So going to the Parents Guide on IMDb, what's actually being shown there? Going to places using things like Common Sense Media, getting a subscription there, and be able to know what's in those films. But even then, you have to be the ones to check these things out. So don't just like, oh, that movie sounds fine, go watch it. You've got to watch it beforehand. We got to be aware of that. And also, there is a place, again, I want to make it very clear. If we put our faith in technology, technology will fail us. So the ultimate solution is not accountability software. It's not about shutting down the internet at the end of the night. Those can help, though, especially age appropriate. I like to pull out from the book Glow Kids. I can never remember how to pronounce his last name, so I'm not going to try. We can put it in the show notes. Basically, he says because of the way in which these screens are forming us, kids 10 under 10 years should not be on any screens, especially mobile devices. Not getting their own smartphone until they're 14, and then social media, never. Right? Because social media was supposed to drive us into connections. And if we know how to do social media well offline, then maybe we can do it online. But sadly, we're using the social media as a replacement for real relationships, right? So very important about this as a father here. And part of that protection also, I would say, Colleen, is to pay attention to your children's friends. Fine, you don't give your kids a smartphone, but are you going to school with them? Are you paying attention to what's going on? Who are their parents? Right? Invite the parents over. Let's do dinner. Let's create these environments of relationships. This is what the Christian community is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be isolation, because it's like in the Serengeti, right? I don't even know what's there. The different animals there, the sheep, if there's sheep in the Serengeti, I don't think there are, but the lions are looking to pick off the weak ones, pick off the ones that are getting isolated. But if we have a strong community, it's much easier to be aware of this. Be aware, though, the likelihood of your child getting exposed to pornography, it's not if, but when. Just the reality here. So the part of this is start to study how to talk about this issue. A secular organization I recommend, I think there's Catholics in the background, Fight the New Drug. They have a lot of great education about how to talk to your kids about this, get educated on this, because the days of silence are over. And then we talked about defensive there. It's been said the best defense is a good offense, right? We're recording this at playoff time, so that's going through my head right now for football, right? So three elements on this. Number one, the best gift you can give your kids, the best way to love your kids is to love your wife, right? Are we dating our spouse? Are we spending that intentional time with our spouse? If those things aren't going on, if there's problems in your marriage, this is where counseling comes in, or retrovi, or anything like that. Very critically important, because I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will scatter. Same things. You're the shepherd of your family, fathers. So very important that you're on point on this. This is where things like, for instance, your own formation is Exodus 90, is getting a group of men that are going to help to sharpen you, right? It's very important, because we oftentimes can get busy with our own sports or jobs or things around the house, that we're not paying attention to the focus of our family, which also means I would estimate at least once a month, at least, and 20 minutes to an hour of alone time with your son or your daughter, helping to guide them, helping to establish these things of intimacy, along with dinners, at least 4 to 5 times a night. The family that prays together stays together. The family eats together stays together, and creating these environments where we're building intimacy, so that when the emotions get eroticized, because remember, eros is a beautiful thing. It's to connect us to the true, the good, and the beautiful, to connect with others, but how is that being defined? How is that being guided? How is that conversation being guided? So, because if we're getting to normal conversations about everyday life things, then when those emotions get eroticized, they're not going to go ask their friends or go online to search the things. Like, Dad, I had these funny feelings. What do I do with them? Oh, let's talk about that, right? And it's not a one and done conversation, right? This is a continual education, which means get educated about the meaning of the body. As my friend Monica Ashour with Tobit, Theology of the Body and Evangelization team, likes to say, the body matters. This is why the church has a wealth of education, especially through this lens of John Paul II's Theology of the Body, that can help us understand not just who and what does it mean to be human, but how do I live my life in a way that is fulfilling and directly connected to this. Sexuality is not a side issue. It is front and center. What does it mean to be male? What does it mean to be female? In the world that has lost its mind about this, guess what? That doesn't have to be your home. So fathers especially, and mothers, but especially fathers, take the lead on this. Is it going to be a battle? Is it going to be tough? Of course it is, but it's worth it.
Amen. Yeah, and we had a guest who we haven't released the episode yet, but he was talking about I think it's called the lid effect, where basically like no organization can outgrow its leader. So if like the man is like growing and definitely like setting the like standard here, the family is naturally going to follow.
Very well said.
It seems like that's kind of what you're saying as well here too. Obviously this having been internet having been around for, past however many years it has, and especially smartphones since 2010, pornography is something that's going to be affecting a lot of dating relationships in today's day and age among young people. What advice do you have for young people who are
Mm.
dating, especially if it's a situation where they've broken the porn addiction, they're not currently struggling with it, but it's still kind of something that they have to wrestle with in their relationship? What should they be aware of?
Yeah. So first off, be honest about that. Right. We have to be very real about what are our tendencies here. Right. So dating is a beautiful thing. Unless you're going to do mailordergroom.com, right, you're going to have to go through dating. Dating is a very important aspect. But I think that the fact of the matter is, in our culture, we have so eroticized relationships that we've forgotten what is the root of all relationships: friendship. Right? What is friendship all about? Right? What are like the idea in our culture right now, because we've eroticized things. If two men or two women are really close emotionally, they must be gay, right? That's a language that's used, and it's a lie, right? Because what we want to do is a sharing of heart, as coming from the Greek, right? What is a friend? A friend is another self, and it's somebody that doesn't. I don't just want to be like them, but I want to challenge them to be more, right? And that's why I would say, first and foremost, in your dating, are you around people of sharing a common heart, a common mind that also is going to challenge you to become more? Like the old phrase goes, "Tell me about the five people I hang around you hang around with most. I'll tell you who you are." So take a look at the five people most of you hang around with. If they're not really good people, it might be time to trade up, because last time I checked, there's at least about 8 billion people on the planet. You will find more friends here, right? So at the root of this is learning how to be friends. So, and one of the best pieces of advice that I ever heard on this topic of dating and courtship was Sarah Swafford, who spends a lot of time on emotional intimacy, you're testing your and checking your emotional intelligence, basically. And
Mhm.
she was to hopefully not ruin her story too much, but she's in confession, and she's struggling with, God, what should I do about dating, things like that. She was a lovely young lady. She's still a lovely lady, and I think she has 6 kids now with her husband Andrew. And the priest just said, run. What? Run, not run away, but run. Develop your skills, develop your talents, develop these things here, that your gifts, your charisms, right? What makes you you? What makes you tick? What are your desires? Like, many of us are not even aware of what are our desires. And guess what? We believe in here in Freedom Coaching, we teach God a desire. My desire is for you. He planted these desires in. So this priest was talking to Sarah, run, start running, start getting your rhythm down, right? Because if we never really, you don't run a marathon if you've never ran. I'm part of the 0.0 club, by the way. But if you're gonna run in reality, you're not just gonna go out the next week and run a marathon. No, you're gonna die. So you got to start training for that marathon. So if we use this analogy, the marriage is a marathon. It's for life. It's to run this, and you're looking for your running partner. So this advice is run, develop your skills, and as you're running, you start to get your stride down. Then start to look around. Is there somebody who's been in your sphere of influence, right, of the other sex, who kind of you share this kind of common goals, who you could see yourself running with? That there might be somebody who's worth going on a date with, might be worth your timer. Because I think, Colleen, in the dating situation, what we've done, we've eroticized it, where people are hooking up in their first date, maybe first 30 minutes, or they're just maybe going on Tinder. They're not building what we call the mountain of intimacy before going after climax, right? But also the fact of the matter is, in this friendship thing here, I want what's best for you. So if you're not called to be my spouse, I don't want to do anything that's going to harm you or me in my psychosexual development. But if you are called to be my spouse, then I want to have an amazing, beautiful love life in all sense of the ways, whether it's with my genitals or not my genitals, right? Directly involved there, right? This is very, very important. So I would say it's acknowledging the fact, going back to your original question, all that's context. How has the pornified culture influenced you? Be honest. It's in our movies, magazines, television shows. It's in the internet. We have been taught to use people. We've been taught to treat people as objects to get what I want. And at the root, it's teaching us how to be selfish. Well, in relationships, especially in marriage, it is to be the total, not 50%, 50%, not 75, 25, but a full and total giving of self. That's what it's supposed to be. And if one or both parties are taking the perspective of wanting to give all myself and directing everything around that way, then that becomes a recipe for a totally joyful environment and joyful relationship. But if it's not, if we're focused on selfishness and that comes in there, that doesn't go away. It will breed and it will create a lot of problems. So to save a lot of these heartaches, A, learn about the meaning of your own body. B, learn what are the deepest desires of my heart. And it's not about sex. It's about connection with others in all ways. And C, it's about developing those friendships that are going to last, of which might be a romantic relationship in marriage.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And then
Mhm.
going kind of transitioning into the marriage side of it, do you have any advice for spouses who might be listening where their spouse is currently struggling with a porn addiction of ways that
Mm.
they can either like things that they should be aware of or ways that they can help support a spouse who maybe is trying to fight the addiction, things that they can do?
Yeah. So obviously, number one is we got to be real about this issue, right? Most of us who are, in sad reality, most of us who are entering into serious relationships, entering into marriage, we have a brokenness of sexuality, right? And this is not the game over. God's allowing this, I like to say, because He's causing us to get to the root of things, to get healing, where otherwise we wouldn't have, perhaps, right? Because sexuality is that call here to love, right, in a very profound way. And so I would say, if obviously if pornography, unchaste behavior has been a part of your past, we've got to deal with that stuff. That's where we can help. This is where other counselors can help. B, if pornography is going on right now, this is a no-go. And especially I'll speak to my beloved sisters out there. If you say you know that your husband's involved with this, first off, this is not your fault. You are enough. You are good enough as you are. You are beautiful enough as you are. You are God's beloved daughter, right? What you're dealing with, as we said before, the pornography on chaste behavior is not the main problem. Yes, it is an act of infidelity. Yes, it is adultery. Yes, it is something that needs to be dealt with here. But most of the involvement of this behavior here, and not approving it, and not dismissing it, but that behavior probably started way before you came on the scene, right? And he's never dealt with this. Why? Because of sexual silence. We've never talked about this. So what this is, remember, God writes straight with crooked lines, but he also allows evil to occur so a greater good can come from here. What this can do, open up, if we're willing to go here, not play the blame game, to acknowledge there might be betrayal trauma on your fault, on your part, right? Received from behavior that comes from your husband or coming from maybe past wounds of other men that were there that you never dealt with. This is a beautiful opportunity to get healing. That's what we do here in Freedom Coaching all day long, working with our clients. We're getting more and more calls, especially for wives who husbands are dealing with. I have this betrayal trauma, and we're working on developing some things. So this is really important. Second, I would say is why did you get married in the first place? It wasn't for the house or the boat or the kids, right? It was about for self. So again, two very practical things, right? If you want to avoid divorce in your marriage, two very simple things. Number one, never stop dating. Just make sure you only date one person, your spouse. Okay, not your smartphone. And this is what I'm also seeing that's happening across the landscape. We've got these little devices like contraception. It's creating a barrier to intimacy.
Mm.
Practice. And again, we're a hypocrite in our home. This is something for us to work on. So I'm not claiming that we do this perfectly. Can you bury your phone for a day? Can you bury it for an hour? Right? Can you put it away? Because what we want most is intentional time. And here's a real practical way. When you go out to eat with somebody, especially if kids around, get your phone off the table. Because by having that table, it sends the message you're not as important as this little device here. But at the end of the day, I hate to break it to you, we're going to die one day, and we're not going to think about, oh man, I wish I did more scrolling. No, I wish I would have spent more time with people who really matter to me. And in a marriage, it's not your children that's most important. It's not your job. It's not your in-laws. God help us. It's going to be your spouse and being present to them, right? So take a good hard look at the ways. What are the things that are creeping? It's a creep effect, right? Not that your husband or your wife's a creep, but the creeping effect of different things going on in life here, right? So what are those things that are stealing time? Because that's usually for a lot of people, that's the most important way we spell love. Time, right? So what are those creeping things there? And then go on the offense, okay? It's the rule of two, basically. I like to do a rule. So it's usually 2-2-2, but I would say 1-2-2. Date every week. Every 2 months, go away for a weekend. Every 2 years, go away for a week without kids as much as possible. Because we want things that we're looking forward to, but also things we can build that intimacy, which means This is going to require some planning. This is going to require a conversation about finances. This is called our sexuality. It's involved in every aspect here. And if we're doing this, oh, and also most importantly, Colleen, I said this earlier, I'll say it again. The family that prays together stays together. Are we going to church together? I'm Catholic. If you're Catholic, are you going to mass? Right? Are you doing that regularly? Are you striving to go to confession, or are we being honest about repentance here? Are we doing these things? We know also from a Catholic side, the Rosary is very powerful. The family that prays the Rosary, Father Patrick Peyton, look him up. He's a rock star saint. I like to. He will be a saint. Is that prayer can bind? It's the chain that binds Satan. Right. So these little things here. And then you're still going to need grace. So have a lot of grace with each other. You're going to mess up. One of the most important phrases that should be at the tip of your tongue are "I love you" and "I forgive you."
Oh, that's wonderful advice. And just like great advice for strengthening a marriage, whether or not porn is involved at all. But obviously, especially for people who might have be struggling with that. Before we wrap up today, I just had one kind of interesting question that I think
Yeah.
is um, interesting to talk about because male and female brains are very different. What do most women not understand about male porn addiction? And then, if you know the opposite as well, what most men don't understand about female porn addiction?
Sure, sure. And again, we would use the term compulsion here, that attachment.
Compulsion.
You're learning. We're all here to learn, right? Here we are. So again, let's see if we can balance it out. So the idea that typically floats in the ethosphere, maybe the internet ethosphere, is that men are visual and women are not. No, men are visual and so are women, but we have something called the corpus callosum. It's what separates the hemispheres of the brain, the left and right brain, affecting the prefrontal cortex and affecting the hippocampus and the limbic system. And so in here, right, women are definitely visual, but it's more connected. It's more they connect it with a whole lot of other things, right? And Colleen, no offense, your brain doesn't shut off, right? It's on 24 hours a day. Men, we get into our nothing box and we're able to just go, right? And so we as men, right, and I think it can be a great strength is we can be hyper focused and focused on the right things. But if we haven't been trained, if we've been programmed by the opposite, this can be very damaging. Okay. So the first thing I would say is first and foremost, this compulsion is real, right? It doesn't mean that every man who's seen pornography has this compulsion. I want to make that very clear. But it's an increasing and high number of people that's involved with this. The women's side, I think one of the head of Magdala, which is another ministry. I'm blanking on her name, but I was reading an article of hers recently. Somewhere about 60% of women who are 60% of women surveyed had an attachment with pornography, right? And I think one of the reasons for that, Colleen, is we've been told in our world there's no difference between men and women. There's androgyny here. Androgyny rules the way, and that's not the way we as Christians would see this. But if broken men are into pornography or whatever we call man, then if I want to be like a man, right, because we're all equal, right, we're all the same, then I have to be in this stuff as well, and it's programmed here. And so we have to be very, very, very well aware of this. And whereas men typically on the visual, for a lot of females, it has to do with her cycle. One of the things I heard of the late Vicky Thorne was mentioned a study that of a woman who, when she's not going through her ovulation period, and she would see pornography, would view that typically as as just dirty pictures, like ick, I don't want that. But if it's a time during ovulation, depending on her environmental factors, depending on her own formation, that could have an arousal response, and then because of it's so powerful there, can lead there to any other time in her cycle being moved to arousal towards these kinds of images, right? So the compulsion is real. We have to be well aware of this. Be well aware of what are our weaknesses, what are our tendencies, right? Sexuality is a good thing, but if we've never been educated about that, informed especially in virtue and directness, and also learning to say no so that we can say yes, if it's only on I follow my impulses and I follow my base desires, we're going to go for this. So a lot of guys, especially, have been formed in this way. Second, I would say, as I said before, Pornography is not the main problem. It's the stuff underneath, right? If we're having a problem with our car, we don't just look on the hood. We have to open the hood up and get inside there. And we might have to call in some experts, an expert mechanic, because this is beyond my part here. And we also want to say along that line is, if I can get the line correct, the traumas that have been induced to us and trauma-based stuff, the traumas transmitted or traumas received or traumas transmitted. I think that's the phrase, right? So if we need to ask these questions, what was our involvement with sexuality growing up? What was the messages about sexuality that we received in our home? Very few of us, and I put myself in the category, had healthy, open, honest, wholesome conversations about sexuality, not a one and done, but these continual conversations, appropriately age based. Really important there. And then the third thing I would say for women to especially understand, this is also for men, it's a mind, heart, and vision issue. It's a chemical issue. It's an intimacy issue of the heart and relational, but also a vision. And we must learn how to see so that we can love.
No, that's a great answer and helping just people understand everything that's going into this. So thank you. And thank you for being on the show today, Steve. Is there any last thoughts that you have before we wrap up for our listeners?
Yeah, yeah, and I just it struck me here, especially to our well, two parts. One, especially to our sisters out there, right, who might find themselves having this attachment, right. It doesn't mean you're utterly broken and that you're irreparably harmed or something's completely wrong with you. No, it just means you've got this attachment, and it's something that needs to be worked through. And the good news is it can be worked through, right. And I'd say that then extending over to the second part is. If you have this attachment, this is going on, again, it doesn't just go away. Seek help and healing. This is where us at Freedom Coaching, freedom-coaching.net, where you can check us out. And we're so many social medias. We just broke into TikTok. We're at Redeem Vision. I'm not too proud of that, but we are. We're going to the broken to go get them out of that. So all those things, there are answers here. And if we can be of service in the work we're doing, we would be honored to be a guide on this path of healing and wholeness.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I will put links to that as well in the bio, in the description down below. So
Great.
people
Thank
can
you so much.
get out there. And thank you again, just for being on the show, for talking about this important issue and for everything you're doing to help men and women with this struggle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colleen. An honor.
Thank you. You're welcome. And to all of our listeners, please like and subscribe. Leave any questions that you have in the comments, and we'll try to answer them or do future episodes answering them. And keep on living the culture of life. God bless.